shout out a question. If you haven't specifically addressed to someone, feel free to address it to that person. If not, just kind of go down the panel and give everybody an opportunity here to chime in. Like Amaya was saying, we have about 20, 30 minutes for this, and then afterwards, we're going to break into some individual groups, go into different rooms and discuss our next topic. But without further ado, if anyone has any questions for anyone here, just raise your hand and we can get started.
Matt, this is a question for Matt and Heath. Basically, if I'm a Singaporean, so what do you think that we should do for the Singaporean amateur league if you have to have that in the future itself?
Well, I've given an example of what I did, and these are the guys in Singapore right here that can probably answer that question best. I don't know what the regulations are in amateur MMA in Singapore, but maybe these guys do.
Yeah, I don't know the regulations yet, but just as Matt has done where he lives, has set up the whole amateur network through his gym and other gyms and local competitions. I think that's exactly what we need to set up here. For people like yourself, people like other gyms that need to get the experience, we need to create that here.
The first step is getting all the gyms in the ONE FC network together and saying, let's do this. The first step is getting all the gyms together in the ONE FC network and saying, let's do this. Let's start cooperating. Let's build this amateur network together. And let's first go and see what we're going to have to go through with the government to make sure it's legal. And I'm sure Victor would have some resources, and Chandra and Heath might have some resources to help direct you guys to the right people to ask those questions.
I've seen it as a huge benefit for the gyms also. Just getting people interested in fighting, they train more. They go do their amateur fight. Now their moms, their friends, everyone local wants to come watch them. It builds the sport.
Yeah. First group.
Yeah. Matt, you're talking about in the States you started the UFC, and I know in California you were saying, Heath, that you've got the Camo organisation. Are they starting to move the steps to unify the entire amateur across America, or?
Camo actually came from UFC.
So Camo and UFC is a whole lot.
Yeah, Jeremy Lappin runs Camo, and what happened in California was the state of California put it up for bid, and everybody applied. Different amateur groups applied, and Camo won the bid. So the government granted them the right to run amateur mixed martial arts. Now there's issues, other people can actually continue to still bid and get that, but nobody has. But the guys that were running it were guys that worked with me at Pride that actually helped me run the amateur MMA shows for the UFC and build the Genesis Fights network that we had as part of the theater show at Pride.
In terms of progression of like techniques, the amount of what you were recommending, for example, a lot of times elbows on the knees to the face, and without like sufficient fuel and something kind of allow for.
Sorry, what's part? I'll give you a quick rundown of what we do. Our rules, standing for amateur MMA, our rules are standing on the feet. You can punch, kick, knee. You can punch, kick, and knee, but you cannot knee to the face. Okay, so basically it's kickboxing, punching and kicking, but knees below the neck only, and no elbows. Takedowns, any takedown is okay, as long as the head does not strike the mat before the body. Okay? So if you take a fighter into the air, then you're responsible for their safety back to the mat, and their head cannot be the first thing that hits the mat. So we don't even say no spiking, we just say the head cannot hit first. It doesn't matter what kind of takedown it is. When they hit the ground, you can do any submission except the small joint submissions, fingers and toes, and you cannot do heel hooks in our amateur ranks. Some amateur ranks allow it. I prefer not to. I came from, the first organization I was in was Pancras, and I saw a lot of ACLs get ripped out and people out for a year. And in amateur, I just don't think that the people that are entering amateur that work day jobs really need to have no ACL for a year. So I personally disallow heel hooks in our organization and object to them for amateur. because people in your gyms are going to want to take a shot at it. And you don't want to exclude everybody. That's what the novice classes are for. These rules are rules that they're going to be able to go back to work. They might have a few bruises, but they're going to be able to go back to work the next day. And when they move into the A class and start working their way up, they're still going to be able to go back to work with maybe a little more because they've proven that they have the skills to get some wins. When they start getting up to where those titles are, I think that's when you're saying, okay, this person might actually make a career out of this. So,
Just a couple things really quick before we continue the Q&A. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Second of all, please stand up so that we can hear you. And all of us here have been hitting the head repeatedly, so it's hard for me to hear this far away, much less an extra 30 feet. And also, please just speak up and say your name so we can address you clearly.
one more thing on the rules. We use a 5-minute first round and a 3-minute second round for all non-title bouts and amateur. Some amateur organizations use 3-minute rounds, some use 5-minute rounds, a lot of them use 3 rounds. We use a 5-minute first round, so our amateurs are getting used to that length of time, and a 3-minute second round. And then when it's a title fight, we add a 3rd round of 3 minutes.
Hi, Eddie Goldman. I want to ask Matt, follow up on the thing you said about MMA not being structured as a sport. Obviously, itself is a sport. When he, for example, wrestled in the Olympics, he went to USA Wrestling Olympic trials, he won, and then he wrestled in the Olympics. That FILA, the International Wrestling Federation, which is part of the International Olympic Committee, ran that event as part of the Olympic program. Where do you see this heading for amateur MMA? Because now you're seeing a proliferation of national and international and local federations, because you have Zuffa set one up, which hasn't run any events to my knowledge. You have another one in France. Russia just had one set up that Fedor is involved in, and a whole variety of them. And FILA, the International Wrestling Federation, is also running their version of amateur MMA called combat grappling. They've had world championships in it. Where do you see the one that you're talking about leading to, and do you think it's going to be possible, given the politics of MMA, to have one federation like, FILA or AIBA or any of these others that are in the IOC or in sporting?
That was for me, right, I don't foresee, I don't try to predict the future of how that's going to go. I can only say what I would like to see. Ideally, everybody would be under one organization, and it would lead to, just like I said, everybody in a network together, leading up to the top promotions. Is that realistic? Probably not. But is it realistic that we can take a big chunk of it for ourselves in the ONE FC network? I hope so. I hope that's where it leads to. There's been well-funded organizations, Affliction and all these pro organizations that only have one event to deal with that have gone under. So just because an amateur organization starts somewhere, it starts doing something, doesn't mean it's going to be around tomorrow. It might have been a good idea for a year, and then it wasn't a good idea anymore. So, I've been doing it for 20 plus years, and it's going to be a good idea for the rest of my life, and that's where I'm going to keep directing the ONE FC network. And so hopefully the people that are involved in the ONE FC network will keep on that path. And hopefully we'll continue to spread that network, and others will fall by the wayside and others will join. Hopefully. We'll see.
We have plans to organize amateur events where all the clubs in ONE FC network come together and compete.
Yeah, it's called UFC. It's going to be called UFC. Okay. No, I'm just joking.
I hope so. That's the idea of amateur sports, is that everybody ties together for local titles, regional titles, national titles in your area, and world titles. Hopefully there will be a ONE FC World Amateur Champion.
Okay.
Joshua, did you want to chime in?
Hey guys, feel free to direct your questions to everybody up here. At this point, it doesn't have to stay on amateur MMA. If you have specific questions outside of that, feel free to ask those as well.
Ben?
I got a question for Chantry, because basically I'm Singaporean, and would evolve in all other gyms in the ONE FC network. create Singaporean amateur league for all the Singaporeans in this region itself? Because I'm really interested in that.
We just formed an amateur MMA team 3 weeks ago at Evolve. So, and now we have about 10 people who made the cut. And we actually have it led by an Evolve student who's been involved for 3 years. But actually, our system is very similar to Matt's in that you're not allowed to be part of that amateur MMA team unless you've done Muay Thai, BJJ, etc. To be honest, I don't think Singapore's ready right now. It's too early in a market like Singapore because they're really only, I don't know, maybe there's 10 MMA gyms, but everyone has an experience of under a year or whatever it is. So, but that's something I agree. I think all the gyms should get together, and I'd be interested in as well. So far, right now, what we do is we just send our guys out to fight Muay Thai in Thailand or to fight the BJJ tournaments that are around the region, and then.
Remember, there's also smoker bouts that are much less organized, they're highly organized, but they're much less formal. And those are possibilities that you can have with the other gyms too to get things going and get things built in your area.
But I know, and Victor and I have discussed this, that Victor's plans are eventually to have, want to see amateur league across Asia with the same rules in each country and want to see networks so that we can all work together to grow the sport. So I know that that's something he's planning. He's even planning the ONE FC national qualifiers for the pro levels. There's a whole league system that he's creating for the guys who play to end up on the big stage at ONE FC. So.
On that, I want to give a shout out to the guys who are already doing it in Taiwan. Raise your hand. Jeff? Okay, you guys are already doing it. You've had 2 events, right? Malaysia is putting on events as well. It's had two amateur events. Korea does the lead-ups to the Road FC network already, which is something like Matt's saying. And as far as Singapore making one, Hong Kong, I can't normally announce it, but next week we are going to get our certificate for our nonprofit association, so it will be the Hong Kong China MMA Association. Today, this afternoon, we're having our first smoker, which is between a karate club and a kudo club that does jujitsu. So these 2 guys are getting together, completely different disciplines who've been cross-training and working on MMA for close to 2 years. And then we're looking at forming our first amateur event at the end of June. So it started as a very complex organization of, we approached every single gym in Hong Kong who had anything to do with mixed martial arts or anyone who was doing a full contact sport. And everyone was 100% behind it. So I've talked to many of you people in this room and you've supported it. So big, huge thank you to Victor for making this a part of today's summit. I think this is like such an incredible thing to happen for all of us to come together. As we go forward, if you have any questions that you would like to know regarding forming a nonprofit or forming this kind of association, feel free to ask me. Otherwise, please start to work together with all of the gyms in your area and make associations that you might not normally make because of politics or whatever. But let's all work together to grow this sport, to get your guys up to the highest level and highest caliber they can. So when they get on this big stage, we can honestly say they're our Asian champions.
Right.
The Asian Amateur Association that you start, would it be part of the WAMMA? Would there be an affiliation with the World Amateur Mixed Martial Arts Association that's been set up for the youth?
Not specifically.
Okay.
I mean, there could be an association, but it's not something.
No, Chauncey just spoke about the ONE FC amateur network.
Yes.
So, for instance, suppose I have an amateur association in India.
Do you have
do I
one?
get an affiliation to the Asian network, or how does it work?
If you're part of the ONE FC network,
Okay.
and you're building your own amateur organization,
Yeah.
and you affiliate that organization with ONE FC, then of course we want everybody to network. Ideally we would network into the same rules and.
So it would be more on the lines of like an Asian Mixed Martial Arts Association, or the one that whatever.
Yeah.
I
think it's already been formed. In One FC Network, I think Victor has basically invited all the major power brokers of industry in each country so that we all work together. And then having someone like Matt, who has 30 years of MMA experience, come up with here are the amateur rules. Let's all follow it, guys. Here are the professional rules, and create a real circuit so that 5 years from now, all across Asia, we're all speaking the same language and we're all playing the same game, so to speak. But I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, I know that Victor just told me last night that he wanted to do another summit, in 6 months with 500 people invited instead of, because whatever, 500 people wanted to come, but he kept it at 150 this time. But this is going to be a regular thing, I think, and I think there's a reason why all you guys, like I said in my speech yesterday, we are the leaders of the industry of Asian MMA, and by us being part of the One FC network, if we collaborate, that's how we bring new fans, new students, and it's going to be good for business for the gyms. It's going to be good for business for the amateur leagues, and then eventually the pro league of One FC. So.
No, and
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. With the success of the last two UFC or One FCs in Singapore, do you think in 2013 there will be increasing events? Like 4 events per year or more?
Victor has a schedule of 18 events next year, so.
Well, in Singapore.
Just in Singapore. I don't know the event schedule, but he just said to me last week that the event schedule is going to ramp up very aggressively next year. I think this year's going to end up being 8 or 9 events, and then, so, and I know there's an event in Singapore for October 6th. But I think I don't think he's going to do 4 in Singapore, because I think his plan is 2 events per city per year, all across Asia, in 28 countries eventually. That's his game plan.
Yeah, I know that I can speak on this too, because I was talking to Victor a little bit about what the schedule like, and he was, and I think it makes a lot of sense, as he was looking at between 7 and, again, I can't speak for it, but to my recollection, it's between 7 and 8 cities next year that they're going to hit each city twice, kind of go through and come back. I mean, in One FC, obviously, it's based out of Singapore, so you're probably going to see more of the shows, a lot of the things starting here, which, I love coming to Singapore, so that's fantastic.
No, and I think the big struggle that Victor has, and I know that, is that having a world-class indoor stadium like Singapore, I don't know if you guys went to the Singapore event or not, it's a very different experience there than it is going to, even, I know in KL, they're already having issues, or in Manila now, they've built a world-class stadium that just launched. So One FC would be in that one, I know, in the future, but that's his big struggle, is that in Asia, the stadium, there's Super Marina, which eventually is going to do a show there as well, but there are very few world-class indoor stadiums. That's a big, big problem,
Awesome.
Prashant, did you have a follow-up question?
I had another question. About 2 years back, when martial combat was still active, I remember someone had got in touch with me at that time because they had set up an association to promote the sport on an amateur level. So, is it the same group or?
No, martial combat has nothing to do with One FC. Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I know it's not alive now anymore, but an association was formed at that stage, and they were giving out affiliations.
I think One FC Network has replaced that. So that amateur MMA association that ESPN did, it was only 6 people. It was myself. It was they called me and said, "Hey, Josh, you want to be part of this thing?" I said, "Yeah, sure." They called Ray Alve at the time with Tiger Muay Thai. It was 6 people, but now we have 150 people at the One FC Network, which there are formal. I think he's given formal letters to everybody, and I think there's a 3-year contract with everybody to be a part of this thing, and this is going to supersede anything that was done before.
So, Prashant, to follow up on that, I think maybe what you're wondering is, the different organizations out there, are we going to work with those organizations? Are we going to affiliate with those organizations?
Yeah.
The answer is we're already affiliated with all of you. And there's organizations and people that are affiliated with One FC, and we want to support that network. So I don't know which organizations, which letters go along with which people in the organizations.
Because-
But if those letters go along with the ONE FC network, then we definitely want to support you guys, and we want to bring you guys fully into the network and help you organize your promotions, help organize, get everybody on the same page together, so that the ONE FC amateur network can be with all of those organizations that you already have. But like I said, I don't know which different organizations go with this.
Because back home I've got a pro network, which is FCC, the Full Contact Championship, as well as I've just set up the Amateur Association. So we're still kind of finding our ground and, you know, getting a set of rules and regulations together. And so
Yeah, that's an example. Your amateur organization, we would have recommendations to follow, guidelines to follow, like the UFCF's guidelines. And if we can all get on the same page with those, then certainly your local champions can fight other local champions under the ONE FC network, create regional titles, and it can just keep moving forward that way.
And I think for all of us, you know, having that ONE FC branding, when Victor comes in to do the first ONE FC national qualifier, whatever country selects, I mean, that branding is huge, huge, huge. In terms of credibility in your own country, knowing that we have the broadcast power of ESPN Star Sports, who knows the depth of that relationship in terms of even broadcasting amateur leagues eventually. I mean, you know, it's a very deep relationship that Victor has with ESPN. So
it's a very powerful, it's a very powerful tool also for you to use with your amateur network. If it's part of ONE FC, then you're connected with a much bigger thing than any of your competition.
yeah, in fact, the affiliation would definitely give a lot of credibility.
yeah.
Like, each one in their own country.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can see it already. I mean, it's, you know, broadcast in 28 countries. It's already on Star Sports in India, the biggest channel for sports in India. So,
An example is, you know, I made the Genesis Fights organization that was under Pride. Pride was in its heyday. And of course, everybody wanted to fight in Genesis Fights because they knew if they did well, they were going to fight in the feeder shows going into Pride, and they might someday be able to fight in Pride. And if someone had a choice of, well, I'll fight in Genesis Fights, or I'll fight in some other amateur fight organization that's not connected with any great shows, of course they were going to choose Genesis Fights.
Yeah, one thing I was going to say too is, I don't think the gyms are really up to speed yet to have too many amateur shows. And then I know at Evolve, we've just begun forming amateurs and bringing them up. But I mean, if there was 3 shows this whole year, it'd probably be a struggle to fill a card with enough amateurs around Singapore. So what I'm saying is I think the gyms really have to spend some time right now building up some amateurs, getting them experience, and getting people that are even ready to fight. So I know at our gym we don't have many guys that are like that yet.
yeah, and it goes back to safety, right? I mean, we can rush this amateur stuff as quickly as possible, but we're going to risk death and injury, and that's a big, big problem. And so for us at Evolve, you know, and that's what it was my speech, safety is our #1 priority. At Evolve, safety is a #1 priority. Like we have all the world champions and the Evolve fight team and all that stuff, but when we teach our normal students, it's, you know, safety is #1, and even our amateur team is #1. Safety is #1. It's just and you know, where Heath and I come from in terms of our martial arts background, we have very, very high standards in terms of before we allow someone to go from amateur, even to compete amateur, on behalf of Evolve, and then even on the pro level on behalf of Evolve. It's a lose-lose situation if you put someone in too early without the skills.
I actually have a question for everybody in the audience here. Who here either trains at a gym or owns a gym somewhere here in Asia? Can we just see a show of hands? I know that there's kind of a mixed group. Okay, so out of everybody, if everybody just keep your hand up really quick. Out of everyone that has their hand up, who here has active fighters, guys that are training that want to do MMA? About 85% of them? And out of the people that are still having their hands up, who's really throwing an amateur show? Anyone have their hands up that's actually doing shows? Great. So you guys should look around and see that the people that have their hands up, these are the people you need to network and take advantage of the time you're here in this summit. I mean, Chatri, Matt, everyone has put together a great structure for building the sport. I mean, it has to grow, it has to be nurtured, and the only way we can really do that is by, when you leave this summit, taking these notes, reaching out to your other gyms, and starting to lay the groundwork and the foundation for how do we build this sport, because, you know, the sport is still really in its infancy. We talked about the amateur wrestling and the baseball. You know, these sports have been around 60, 70, 80 years, mixed martial arts. I mean, especially in Asia, this is really the first time it's becoming prevalent. And when we have the pleasure of having the guys like Matt that have a plethora of experience giving us the framework for how we build that sport, now the ball's in your court. You have to reach out, get everyone's gym number, get their information, come together, reach out to Chatri, and start, you know, putting these organizations together so you can have that, and we can bring it to the next level. It's a collaborative effort. And you can't really sit back and wait for one person to take the initiative. You have to take the initiative within your own camp. And that's really the only way to build the sport collaboratively, is just taking stock of your own gym first and moving forward.
The next question for the crowd would be, who's running amateur promotions already?
Show of hands.
Take a look. Take a look, folks.
Wow.
If these people are closer to you than I am in the US,